Are the quarterback dominoes starting to fall for Oregon in the 2024 recruiting class? We'll take a closer look at a couple of Will Stein's top targets in this episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. In case you're new here, I'm your host, Max Torres. Excited to have you guys along for another episode, whether you're watching us on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres or listening to us on your podcasting platform of choice. We appreciate the support. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to talk some Duck football. Like, comment, and subscribe. Always appreciate the feedback and love engaging with you guys in the comments. And let me know what you're feeling, how you're feeling about Oregon's recruiting of the 2024 quarterback. Or rather, your feelings about how Oregon's going about recruiting the quarterback position in 2024. All right, let's hop into today's episode. Got a couple of guys we're going to be focusing on today in today's episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Still on the road. I'm in the Bay, back home, and then I'll be heading to Long Beach this afternoon. But we've got a couple of pretty significant updates to talk about here in the 2024 recruiting class, especially with the quarterback position for Oregon. The Ducks are just coming off of landing a big commitment from Texas safety Aaron Flowers over the weekend. Tons of breakdown over on ducksdigest.com that you guys can check out, and then have a recent episode talking about that commitment on the channel as well. But let's talk about this. Are quarterback dominoes about to start falling for Oregon in the 2024 class? I think when we're looking at that question, let's start off with one big-time target. Michael Van Buren is a big-time target for Oregon here at quarterback in the 2024 recruiting class. He plays at St. Francis Academy in Baltimore, Maryland. Looking at his rankings and everything, 247 Sports Composite, you guys know that's what I like to use. He's rated a 4-star prospect, .9412. Ranked the number 128th player in the country, the number 11 quarterback, and the number 3 prospect in the state of Maryland. What's the big news with Michael Van Buren? Well, he's been on Oregon's radar for a long time, even before Dan Lanning got hired. He was recruited by Kenny Dillingham when he was still on staff at Oregon, but Michael Van Buren has set a commitment date of July 8th. So still quite a bit of time, still left in this recruitment for Oregon to, get more involved and hopefully improve their standing with the Baltimore passer. But so it looks like Oregon is still in the picture with Van Buren. He didn't release that news with a top group of schools, but Brian Doan of 247 Sports has done a pretty good job reporting on this one. And he did report that there's, a pretty good feel for what schools are involved here with Van Buren, talking about Maryland, Oregon, Penn State, and Oklahoma being in the race because he either made spring visits there or he's set to visit those schools in the future. As far as his next trip, Van Buren did announce that he's going to be making it out to Eugene this weekend for a visit, and that's going to be a big trip for the Ducks. They got Van Buren on campus in January. For all intents and purposes, looks like that visit went pretty well. But you get him back on campus after a couple of months, and now that he has a commitment date, you can kind of work with that. However, it does look like, from that group of schools that we mentioned, Maryland, obviously the in-state program, Mike Loxley has a good connection there. They have geography on their side, but quarterbacks don't usually care too much about distance. But Maryland's a school, I think that is worth watching and obviously worth a mention in this update. And then you also have Oklahoma, which just landed a quarterback. I think it was Michael Hawkins. I want to say it was his name, from the state of Texas last week. So they already have a quarterback in 2024. You probably figure that takes them out of the race here for Van Buren unless they want to take 2 quarterbacks. But as is the case with quarterbacks, you kind of have to ask yourself, is this a guy who is comfortable, playing in, or being part of a class with 2 quarterbacks? That's not cool with everybody. Everyone has a different situation. But the big update, aside from him coming out to Oregon this weekend, is that he's received a pair of crystal ball predictions to Penn State. over on 24/7 Sports. Brian Doan, who I just talked about, and then Steve Wiltfong, the 247 Sports Director of Recruiting, also logged a prediction for Michael Van Buren to end up at Penn State. And honestly, this doesn't come as a huge surprise. He's been out to Penn State a number of times, and I was under the impression even before these predictions came in that Penn State was in a great spot to land Michael Van Buren. I feel like Penn State, not entirely dissimilar to Oregon State as far as they're kind of that school that I feel like has been one quarterback away. And I'm sure that that's probably part of their pitch to Van Buren in this recruitment. But that's kind of where, other industry experts kind of see this recruitment going right now. Oregon has done a pretty good job of recruiting the DMV area, DC, Maryland, Virginia, that area. They did land Colin Gill, the cornerback out of St. John's College High School in the 2023 recruiting class. They also have Damon David from the 2021 class. He's out of the Baltimore area. They did get Dante Thornton in 2021, but he's on his way now at Tennessee. So you have some Baltimore connections on the roster there, but certainly not an area that Oregon has really done a good job in. Not a hot spot or a pipeline by any means. You also remember that they went for Nicholas Harbor out of the DC area in 2023. Weren't able to get him. He ended up at South Carolina. And then you're also going after Dylan Stewart, one of the top edge rushers in the country in 2024. I think he's supposed to visit for the Oregon spring game, and he's also out of the DC area. So this is an area that Dan Lanning, at least his staff, looks very intent on prioritizing here, both in the 2023 class, 2024 class, and beyond. So Van Buren's visit to Oregon this weekend is absolutely an important one because you want to give yourself a good shot. And it really feels like Van Buren is one of these guys that Oregon is really prioritizing in the 2024 class. This is a pretty top-heavy class as far as the quarterback position goes. And Van Buren has been tabbed as one of those guys. He's not the biggest quarterback you'll find. He's 5'11", 185 pounds, but he's one of the best signal callers in the country, and he's definitely a guy who can improvise, can make all the throws, has a really, really strong arm from what I've been able to see on tape. Hopefully I can see him in person someday, but looks like a really special talent at quarterback. And those are basically the updates that I have right now. I haven't been able to interview him. Hopefully I can get him on the phone for an update and kind of see where things stand there. But either way, it's a positive update that the Ducks are able to get Van Buren back on campus this weekend, and that they have a commitment date to kind of work towards and work around. Because this is a summer commitment date. Maybe they'll be able to get him on campus for an official. I believe he has only set one official visit to Penn State, and I believe the reports are that he's going to be there in mid-June. So that's a guy to watch for, and I would also support the predictions that we talked about earlier this show with Van Buren going to Penn State, that he already has that official set up right now. So that's kind of the latest that we have right now on Michael Van Buren. He'll head to Eugene this weekend for an important visit with the Ducks. Let's talk about Luke Moga, the 2024 quarterback out of Phoenix, Arizona, Sunny Slope High School. What's the update with Moga? I mean, if you haven't heard about Moga by now, you probably don't have a Twitter account. I'm just kidding. But no, for real, this is a guy that has really seen his recruitment explode since the start of the new year. He's definitely emerged as one of the biggest names on the national scale for the quarterback position. And he's not really rated super highly. 247 Sports Composite has him as a 3-star, 0.8759, number 582 player in the country, number 33 quarterback, and number 12 prospect in Arizona. He stands at 25 reported scholarship offers, and he's 6'2", 190 pounds. So why are we talking about Luke Moga? It's because he's emerged as a major quarterback target for Will Stein and this Oregon staff here in 2024. And he, like I was kind of saying, his stock was taken off on the recruiting trail. He was getting offers from all across the country. He was taking visits, everywhere, Miami, Oregon, BYU as well, just to name a few. But the significant update is that today, Tuesday, April 11th, he announced his commitment date. Luke Moga will make his college commitment on April 28th, and he will choose from what looks like a final six in this graphic that he tweeted, final six of Oregon, Miami, TCU, BYU, Michigan State, and the in-state Arizona State Sun Devils. So, this is a guy who spoke very highly of Oregon previously when he made it out to Oregon and was able to take those trips and meet the staff. But I was able to talk to Moga in February and kind of just get some quotes on where he is with things. And he says that Dan Lanning's a super down-to-earth dude, and he appreciates that, saying that Lanning has a calm swagger to him, which is cool. Let's see what else. He was saying that, Coach Stein just being there a few weeks is awesome. He's really fitting in well. And I think that that's a place I could see myself at, and his success at UTSA will definitely translate over to Oregon. So we know that this is a guy that Oregon made a good impression on. And that visit obviously went well. And then what's also interesting and worth noting here with Luke Moga, he told me that he's going to be visiting Oregon on April 22nd. So that was, I think, earlier this past week. So maybe things have changed. So last week, I guess that would be. So maybe things have changed since then, but it's looking like we're going to operate off of that because that's what, he told me the most recent communication that I have with him. He's going to be able to come back out to Oregon on April 22nd, and then his commitment date comes that next week on April 28th. So I think, with all of that, it's definitely looking like, a commitment to Oregon wouldn't come as a massive surprise. A couple predictions have come in now for Moga to end up at Oregon. Justin Hopkins of Scoop Duck had one, and then Steve Wiltfong placed his prediction to Oregon this morning on Tuesday, with Moga making that announcement of his commitment date. So you kind of read between the tea leaves, and you can see that Oregon's looking like they're in a pretty good spot here for the Arizona passer. And I think another thing that's interesting with this timing, not only with the visit, but with the commitment date. Commitment date of April 28th, and Oregon's spring game is on April 29th. So, I'm kind of just, thinking about the scenarios here, and just think if they're able to get a commitment, if Oregon's able to get a commitment from Moga the day before the spring game, and then you have the spring game, your marquee recruiting event of the year, tons of talent, so many 5-stars on campus. If you can get that commitment, you can parlay that into some serious momentum. And I said this when Aaron Flowers committed last week. I feel like Oregon isn't far off from being on a big string of commitments here in the 2024 class. And I listed some guys that I've felt very good about Oregon's chances with over on Ducks Digest in my next 5 to commit story. I also just realized that I said Luca Moga in my ticker, so I definitely need to change that. That's embarrassing. But at least I realized it now. Luke Moga, sorry about that. But yeah, just think about it. If Oregon's able to get a commitment from Luke Moga right before the spring game, that definitely bodes well for them on their recruiting trail. You can get your quarterback, all taken care of in the 2024 class, and then you can use him, not use him, but, you can use that commitment to parlay that into momentum. And, he's kind of the face of the class. You have, receivers that are already on board. You want to get some offensive linemen to play along with Fox Crater, a running back, and it just makes things easier for a coaching staff if you have that quarterback position taken care of. So I'm trying to think if there's any other notes that I want to add on Luke Moga. I mean, he's a super athletic quarterback. I think he runs a sub 11 in the 100 meters. I almost said the 100-yard dash, but I think he runs sub 11 in the 100 meters, which is awesome. I mean, anytime you're talking about high school track, if a guy can run under 11 in the 100, you're looking at some pretty solid speed. Really athletic guy, has really solid junior tape over in Arizona. And, Arizona is an interesting state because I think it's one that's getting more respect gradually each year. You had a couple guys that you got from Arizona in the 23 class, most notably Cole Martin, Michael Gardner, Amari Washington. And then you have a good number of connections to the state of Arizona. I talked about a couple of those guys on the roster. You also have Kyler Casper, who you signed out of Arizona. And then, a couple of various connections to the state on staff, in the recruiting department, in the coaching department. And you lose Jordan Somerville, to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was an Arizona native on the staff. He was the assistant quarterbacks coach. So I know that he played a role in Oregon's recruitment of Moga, but you got to just keep the ball rolling. Life goes on. So this could be really good news for Oregon in the 2024 recruiting class if they're able to ultimately get a commitment from Luke Moga. I'm not at the point right now of making a prediction, but I am feeling pretty solid about where Oregon stands here, given the timeline, what he said about Oregon and where Oregon ultimately wants to go, and how they kind of set this one up geographically. I think that they're in an awesome spot with Luke Moga. It just seems like more and more signs are making it apparent that Luke Moga is Oregon's guy in the 2024 recruiting class. So we'll have to keep following this one. Maybe we can talk to him before or after that trip to Eugene, but Luke Moga is a major name to watch for Oregon recruiting in the 2024 class. So we talked about a couple guys in on Oregon's radar here in the 2024 recruiting class, right? You got Michael Van Buren out of St. Francis Academy in Baltimore, and then you got Luke Moga, not Luca Moga, Luke Moga. I messed up that ticker, but you got Luke Moga out of Sunny Slope in Phoenix, Arizona. But it just kind of gets you to wondering how many quarterbacks does Oregon want to take in 2024? It's a pretty legitimate question right now, right? Especially if we're operating on the fact that or on the belief, I should say, that Oregon's in a pretty good spot with Luke Moga. How many quarterbacks do you want to take in the 2024 class? So those are two guys that Oregon's probably in a good spot for right now, but there are some other guys in this class. You got Dylan Raiola out of Pinnacle High School, also in Phoenix. It was looking like he was going to make it out to Oregon for the spring game, probably the headliner in that visit weekend, number one guy in the country. How can you not be the headliner? But there's been some buzz. There's been some reports, I think, some smoke that he may not make it out for that visit anymore. I'm still working to confirm that, tracks down some info on that, but you got some other big schools in the running with that one. You got USC, Georgia, Nebraska. You guys know the finalists or the top group that he's kind of operating from. So you got Dylan Raiola there. I'm sure Oregon would love to stay involved, and they're going to do everything they can to stay involved. But that's looking like, USC, Georgia, Nebraska, kind of all over the place. The predictions have flip-flopped quite a bit. But aside from Raiola, you got Michael Van Buren. You got and the only other top 150 guy that the Ducks are in the running for, at least, or kind of on the radar for, is Elijah Brown out of Mater Dei in Santa Ana, Southern California. But the last time that I talked to Elijah Brown, it didn't really seem like Oregon was super involved there. Like the contact was really kind of there that you would think it would be with a top quarterback target. Elijah's super low key, from the times that I've talked to him. He's got a really calm demeanor, doesn't love doing recruiting interviews. But he's I'm fortunate enough that he's given me some of his time when I talk to him, but he always shows up, and I think he's definitely a top quarterback in the country. I just feel like he's a little under recruited because he may not look as physically imposing as some other guys, but he's only lost one game in his high school career. And, some of the schools that are involved there, you got UCLA, USC, Arizona State, I want to say. And then a newer school that's kind of starting to contact him a bit is Ohio State, but they just got Eric Nolan. So I doubt that would be the case for him. But yeah, like I said, a top heavy class, the only top 150 prospects that Oregon's really in on. If you want to say Dylan Raiola, Michael Van Buren, and then Elijah Brown as well, but the contact hasn't really been there. So then you got Luke Moga, and then you also have Will Hammond. I think he's a guy to keep an eye on out of Texas. He's currently committed to Texas Tech, but maybe the Ducks bring him out for a visit. You all obviously know that Will Stein has some very strong roots in Texas after serving at UTSA as their co-offensive coordinator, I believe it was. So those are kind of some of the names that I feel like we know are in play for Oregon. But let's look at what Oregon football is looking like in 2024, right? You have one more year of Bo Nix in 2023, and then he's going to be done playing college ball, heading to the NFL draft. Ty Thompson's looking like your projected starter for Oregon football in 2024, but he hasn't played a whole lot. He hasn't had consistency at offensive coordinator, right? So that's, I think, a significant hurdle that he's having to overcome in his development. But he hasn't looked great when he's been on the field. I don't want to slam the guy, but that's just the reality of the matter. Whatever the circumstances are, the on-field production hasn't looked that great. And he's going to be entering his fourth college season in 2024, right? He came in 2021, redshirted, and then you have 2022, and then 2023. He'll already have 3 years of college under his belt, but probably not a whole lot of playing time unless he's able to get in some, mop-up duty, garbage time this season, which I think he should definitely be able to. But I don't know how confident you are in Thompson as your starter, at least right now, based on what you've seen from him on the field. So he's looking like the main guy right now. And then you also have Austin Novosad from the 2023 recruiting class, right? Comes over from the state of Texas after being a longtime Baylor commit. So that's essentially your scholarship depth now at Oregon. And then if you have, if you can maybe add a guy like Luke Moga or Van Buren, and then you also have Matt Rush on the roster right now, but he's a senior, so and he's a former walk-on, so I would imagine that the Ducks don't want to be in a situation where he has to start, but I like that addition for 2023. So I think that, it's worth asking this question. How many quarterbacks do you want to take if you're Oregon in 2024? The more I think about it, maybe it makes sense to take 2 quarterbacks. Maybe you take, a high school guy, and then maybe you bring in someone from the transfer portal, because that there's going to be guys that hit the portal, that they go to their school and maybe things don't work out. I mean, let's face it. It's a reality of college football. Quarterback goes to a school expecting to start right away, and he doesn't want to sit. So if he goes to his school, goes through a full season and doesn't get that starting job, doesn't see the field, maybe that's where, those past relationships come into play, and kind of favor you, right? Maybe you hit those guys up in the portal, and then you say, hey, come on over to Oregon. I know things didn't work out there, but we got a pretty sweet deal here. Top O-line recruits, still coming. I think that's a huge thing that Alik Terry obviously has to do. Guys like Brandon Baker have to be an absolute priority. And then you're also getting skill talent. A lot of good receivers that are going to keep coming. You're always going to have good running backs. And then this is a year for Will Stein to prove himself and show that his offense is going to be a hit in Oregon, because he's got a pretty good act to follow up after Kenny Dillingham, really lit this offense on fire in 2022. So I think that it's worth considering taking 2 quarterbacks in the 2024 class, just because you don't really have that depth in that room, and you got to give yourself options. If someone goes down, or if someone transfers, you just got to have some more bodies in that room. And I think that Oregon just doesn't really have those right now. So I think that you would probably want to go, just because it's a very top-heavy quarterback class, you'll probably get 1 prep guy from the high school ranks, and then why not just, kind of leave a spot open for a transfer portal guy? I think that would be a really smart way to go about managing the quarterback position at Oregon. And you talk about a quarterback room and, having too many guys, being crowded. You want to have guys that are going to be able to compete at the end of the day and that are willing to compete. We got to give Ty Thompson his praise for sticking around Oregon, because it looks like he'll probably have been at Oregon for 3 years before he really gets a super solid shot at that starting job. So credit to him for staying around to compete. I definitely don't want to go without saying that. But in the era of the transfer portal now, quarterback's a 1-year deal. You just got to look at your room on a year-by-year basis. You're going to keep pursuing those guys, those top guys, every year that you can, right? If you have the ability to recruit top-tier guys, of course you're going to go after them and ultimately try to get them. But it's hard to look at the quarterback picture beyond just a season at a time, because you can hop in the portal and then have a new guy, have your starter like with Bo Nix, at the drop of a hat. So I think that makes more sense, because you're also just giving yourself the chance of getting a guy who played a lot of college football already, versus, like we've talked about, this is why the portal is affecting high school recruiting. You don't have to worry about developing a guy from the high school ranks. You can just get him from the portal, And then you already have a guy who's more or less a proven commodity and who's played some good college football already before he gets to Oregon. Sipping on a Snapple. I'm not sponsored by Snapple yet, but if you guys watch the show, you know I love my Snapple. Snapple, sponsor your boy. But yeah, I think that's definitely a reasonable option for Oregon to consider right now and probably pursue. We thought when Will Stein got hired that maybe the Ducks were going to go after Hudson Card because of their connection at Lake Travis High School out there in Texas. So the connections are always going to pop up, right? You got when you're looking at transfers, you always have to look at how do they connect? Where's that connection? Where's that relationship to the current staff? So I think that's a good option for Oregon in 2024 is to go after a prep guy and go after a transfer portal guy. But it's going to be interesting to see how they juggle that. But we got the significant updates in this episode as far as just talking about some quarterback dominoes for Oregon. If they can get that quarterback squared away, then that'll be a big check mark that you can check off the list here in the 2024 recruiting class. And then that'll definitely kickstart some more momentum for Oregon in 2024. So I think that I really like where Oregon's at right now in the 2024 class, especially after adding Aaron Flowers, getting a big recruiting win over Lincoln Riley and USC. Aaron Flowers was telling me that it was Oregon and SC, and then Oklahoma was also in the picture a little bit. But Oregon's doing a real good job in the state of Texas, and I think that Flowers is an awesome addition to this class. Really good way to start your defensive back recruiting in 2024. And Demetrius Martin's got a pretty big act to follow up after winning Pac-12 Recruiter of the Year in 2023 and signing a number of really talented defensive backs. And some of them I think are going to be in the mix for Oregon right away because that cornerback position has not really has not met the level of expectations and has not been playing to the level that Oregon needs it to get where they want to go. And that's going to be a big challenge for Oregon in 2023 with Christian Gonzalez off to the NFL. So that's a whole nother story to follow. But we talked about the quarterback dominoes starting to fall here for Oregon. It looks like it's definitely the case that they're starting to fall. A lot of top guys, Aaron Nolan was to Ohio State this past weekend. And then, you had Jaden Davis to Michigan. And Tennessee got their quarterback not too long ago. So it's going to be important for Oregon to get one of their guys here. And I think that Luke Moga is definitely looking like the top option for them right now. But you know how quickly things can change in recruiting, so we're going to have to continue following that. But before I get out of here, you guys, friendly reminder to follow me and lock in on all social media platforms. I'm at mtorres sports on Twitter, at mtorres sports on Instagram. And then you can find me on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres. Do me a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. It's a huge help, and it only takes a second out of your day. And then go ahead and share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, and with other Duck fans. Appreciate you guys taking some time out of your day, stopping by to talk about some Oregon football and some Cruton. But appreciate the support. Appreciate you guys stopping by, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.